We've often heard the words, love your neighbor as yourself. In fact, in the Bible, we find it 8 times mentioned. And in this instance, one of the experts of Old Testament law wanted to test Jesus in an attempt to catch him speaking against the law as they built their case to put his ministry to an end. And when pressed as to who is my neighbor, we're given this parable. Just about every child who has heard this story has either been encouraged or desired to be just like the Good Samaritan. I'm pretty sure when I was young, we had the flannel board characters back in Sunday school, and there was probably even a film strip somewhere as well. And if you don't know what those things are, research ancient educational tools. So let's review for a minute. And there may be a few here who don't know about the Samaritans and the Jews. The Samaritans, you see, were descendants of the ancient northern kingdom of Israel, one that no longer existed at the time of Jesus. Jewish people considered them, the Samaritans, outside the covenant, not a people considered children of God. And because of this, extremely hostile relations existed between the Jewish people and the Samaritan people. I guess you could compare it to athletic teams and their most heated rivals, but only worse. All the focus, at least in my personal lifetime, has been on being like the Samaritan. The parable begins with a man, and the assumption here is that he's a Jewish man who is set upon by thieves and robbers on his short journey from Jerusalem to the town of Jericho. He is beaten and left to die. 2 men pass by, both from the Jewish religious community, and both pass by quickly, knowing that someone was in need. And if they did make eye contact, it was brief, but both thought more for their own safety, with little or no regard for the life of the severely injured man. And then along came the Samaritan man, the enemy, who showed compassion and helped. The point Jesus was making was that all people are my neighbor. The term service, in its purest form, can be defined as someone who helps someone no matter what, without regard for themselves, no pat on the back, no attaboy, and often done without anyone knowing. And the assumption with the Samaritan's act of service is that that's what all Christians do, what all people should do. But then I looked at the story again and noticed some things that I hadn't really seen before. Did you know that Jesus never uses the word good to describe the Samaritan? He just uses the term Samaritan. Others over the years have decided the need to add the word good, maybe because most Samaritans were assumed to not be good. I'm not sure why. The man laying by the side of the road is never identified as a Jewish man, but because of the crowd who Jesus was speaking with and the person asking Jesus the questions, because they were Jewish, it's assumed that the man was. And identifying the man who was of service to someone in need as being a Samaritan might bring home the point even more. If a Samaritan could love his neighbor as himself, maybe anyone could? Maybe Jesus' goal here was to try to help us focus on the story rather than the ethnicity. So I've been thinking that instead of relating to the Samaritan, maybe I should consider the other characters in the story. I see so much of myself in the two people who pass by on the other side of the road. Some conjecture that because of their religious status, these two did not want to check on the man in case he was dead, and if so, would be considered unclean. They would be considered unclean by others. Either way, no act of service there. And as far as me, so often, when confronted with opportunities to serve others, I look the other way. Literally look the other way. Maybe I don't want to get myself dirty or unclean by doing so, or maybe if I ignore it, it'll go away. Things like making eye contact with the people on the corner, holding signs like need help, out of work. And sometimes I've even physically changed lanes in my car to avoid having to make eye contact. Maybe I won't feel obligated or guilty if I do. Gosh, I see so much of myself in those two. And then I see myself sometimes in the man who was left to die, all alone, with no one helping me. But then the Samaritan man steps in to save me, just as Jesus has saved me from eternal damnation. And if we focus on Jesus as the Samaritan man, maybe then we begin to have a better idea as to just what service is. Dr. Ferguson and I have talked a lot about this over the years, and while we might disagree on some minute points regarding exactly what service is, we are both thoroughly in agreement as to its importance in the lives of God's people. Let's take a look at the example set by the Samaritan man. First of all, he stops. He's not afraid to make eye contact. He doesn't drive by, doesn't look the other way, but he gets down on his knees by the man who needs help. And secondly, he does what some consider to be the most important part of service. He takes time. The Samaritan doesn't hand him the money on the side of the road and keep on driving. He doesn't do a short-term mission trip and then go home and pat himself on the back, congratulating himself on what a good job he's done and put it out on social media. He doesn't donate toys or gifts at Christmas to help people he never meets or spends time with. No, he gets himself dirty, picking the man up, delivering him to a place that will give him care, and then comes back to pay. When I think of service like this, a couple episodes come to mind. I think of one or two of our athletes finding a homeless man and sharing extra food with him. A simple act of unsolicited love and care, a service without looking for anything in return. And then I think of the story of my dad that I tell often, of being in downtown Portland, Oregon, before we were married, and him seeing a homeless man across the street while I was in a store. And I saw him go and sit down with a homeless man and spend 15 minutes with him. And I'm wondering, what the heck is going on? And so when I talk to Dad after, I go, Dad, what did you say to that guy? And he goes, I went and asked him if I could borrow a quarter. And in the ensuing 15 minutes, he got the man's life story. So next time, when you're driving down the road and you see someone standing on the corner with a sign, consider a greater gift than money. Or maybe even more important, when you're laying there beside the road of life, helpless and without hope, consider the love shown by the Samaritan. Consider the love shown to us by Jesus. Consider all that Jesus does and did for us. Consider that he has paid the price. Consider that he took the time needed for each one of us and stops for us without fail. Consider the time he spent on the cross for each and every one of us. Consider the greatest act of service ever done.